Good morning, I'm Barbara Kay, here with Susan Schulman-Pertnoy. Welcome to Mosaic, Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County's weekly news magazine show. Mosaic explores Jewish topics here in the Palm Beaches and around the world.
The 2016 election may be behind us, but its effects are long from over. And with the inauguration of Donald Trump just weeks away, there are far more questions than answers about how his presidency will affect our lives. On this very special episode of Mosaic, we'll sit down for an in-depth discussion with former ambassador to Iraq and Turkey, James Jeffrey, and with David Makovsky, two distinguished fellows from the Washington Institute of Near East Policy. We'll be right back with Mosaic after this brief commercial message.
From empowering Jewish college students to stand up to anti-Israel activity on campus, to enabling seniors and Holocaust survivors to age with dignity, transforming, inspiring, saving, Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County is doing all of this here and around the world.
They say that caring for the elderly is a profession of the heart. As the director of home health care at Morse Life, I know that to be true. When I see an older person feeling safe and secure at home, I know I've done my job. To make a difference, to show compassion, dignity, and respect, it's not just our job, it's our mission.
Morse Life Home Health Care.
Morse Life Health System, honoring senior living.
Good morning. We're here with two distinguished fellows from the Washington Institute of Near East Policy. Welcome, gentlemen. And before we get started on the Middle East, could you please tell us something about the Washington Institute? Give us an overview.
I'll just say the Washington Institute is what we call in Washington a think tank, a research institute. And it tries like a laser on the Middle East per se. There are some think tanks that deal with the whole world. If they're supermarkets, we're a boutique, I would say. But we see that this is a region that has bedeviled American policymakers. It has become really the central arena of American foreign policy, for better or worse, since the end of the Cold War. And our view is we need experts, people like Jim Jeffrey, who've have a distinguished career in government, and other people who've been in government or other facets of life that have a real expertise in the specific countries that hopefully can see further, dig deeper than what you'll read in the newspaper. And the goal is to come up with very actionable ideas that will help our government in grappling with this very difficult and often depressing part of the world. But just because it's hard, it doesn't make it less important, it makes it more important.
No, it's very complicated.
And while we publish these ideas and to the media, as we're doing today, in our publications at the Washington Institute and in any other media vehicle, from the New York Times to the Atlantic that we can get into, we also often play a role directly in reaching out to try to advance American foreign policy interests, or what we think is right. David was recently involved in a very interesting project in Israel between Palestinian and Jewish religious leaders. And all of us have contacts in the government. Many of these are very quiet. People call us, people bring us in. We talk, we try to present our views on what should be done on issues from the future of ISIS to the Iranian nuclear agreement.
So you cover the gamut. You know, let's take what you just did. I think you're also involved in BDS. And so you were in Israel for a Palestinian-Israeli conference?
Right. Well, yeah, what Jim was alluding to is we felt that people are getting stabbed, killed in the name of religion. So are religious leaders part of the solution or part of the problem? So we thought it would be really nice if we could bring the top clerics, have like a religious summit. And we did it at the home of the president of Israel. Remember, Israel has a prime minister, Netanyahu, but also has a president who is the head of state, Ruby Rivlin, and is very, very focused on coexistence issues. And we brought the leading religious figure, the chief rabbi of Israel, and his counterpart on the Palestinian side, and came out with a joint statement against violence in the name of religion. We're going to have
That's
another
powerful.
round. And yeah, well, we think it's needed because in that part of the world, the religious leaders might, in some places they have outright power, but they certainly have a lot of influence. So we believe if we can bring them together to make joint statements against violence, and we could attract more attention, it could hopefully lower the tensions there. We're not under any illusions that religious leaders can solve this conflict, but they're not substitutes for diplomats, but they are supplements. And we think it's very important that we need to get these people to speak out more together against violence in the name of religion.
Well, that's a very critical thing to do, and you bring that to college campuses.
Right, that's the other, it's a piece that I've been working on. I think I've visited 126 campuses. It's a lot of campus visits. I'm very worried that young people are giving up on Israel or on trying to solve Israeli and Palestinian issues. I realize that we were much more active in the 90s in seeing this. I witnessed the Madrid Peace Conference, the handshake on the White House lawn, the Jordan-Israel Peace Treaty, and these people weren't even born. So in this up and down roller coaster, the 20-somethings have seen no ups. They've only seen downs. So it's important, and as someone who worked for Secretary of State Kerry on the peace team, it's very important to bring the word about, to the extent we can talk, some things we're not allowed to talk about, but the extent we can talk, to give some hope, inspiration, hopefully encouragement, telling people not to give up on Israel, not to give up on the cause of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. So I feel it's something that needs to happen, because I worry the young people, the millennials, will be the first to give up.
Yeah.
Because they don't have any good memories.
Well, they need facts and the truth.
That's it.
Moving more into the political arena and coming off of our new election, let's talk about the Iran deal. Vis-a-vis Trump. Can he really rip it up, or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, first of all, the facts and the law. This is an executive agreement. It was signed by President Obama. Specifically, the agreement itself was signed by President Obama. There's a UN Security Council resolution that supports it, and there's nothing we can do about that. That's law. But the core document, the agreement of the P5+1, as we call it, in Iran, we can obviously renege on our commitments under it, which were primarily related to sanctions, and in that sense withdraw from the agreement. Whether he'll do that or not, that's another question, but there's no question that legally he can do so.
Do you think it's prudent for him to do so?
I don't think so. The reason is, if he withdraws from the agreement, everybody else will continue with the agreement. The way we got Iran to the table in the first place, and this began, the Obama administration forgets about this, it began in the Bush administration. I was involved in that. We opted not to go to war with Iran, but to reach out to these other countries, Germany, France, Britain, China, and Russia, to do a negotiated response to this threat from Iran, because everybody was at risk from Iran getting nuclear weapons, but more importantly, the only way we could really effectively sanction Iran is not by stopping imports of Iranian oil and pistachios and rugs, but getting the entire world to stop the import of oil. To do that, you have to have a multilateral negotiated process that brings in the UN, brings in the international organizations. That's what we did. Iran's oil exports were cut by over 50%. They were in deep financial trouble when they signed up for this agreement. The problem is, we can't get those sanctions back on if it seems that we pulled out of the agreement that everybody else finds acceptable. That's the problem in a nutshell.
Right, that sounds like it would be a ridiculous way to solve the issue, because, I mean, if we're the only ones out there doing that, it makes us look very weak, I would think.
Right, but here's the problem, and this gets to the psychology or pathology of that agreement and why so many people, beginning with the Israelis, are upset about it. It's not simply the fear of a quote Islamic bomb. There's been an Islamic bomb for decades in Pakistan, but nobody other than the Indians is worried about it, at least if they can keep them out of the hands of terrorists, because Pakistan doesn't have an agenda, an expansionist agenda that threatens the states of the Middle East and threatens our security system that we've put in place there and elsewhere with help of our friends since World War II. Iran does. And that's the thing that the Obama administration missed. It saw this as a leverage to get Iran to understand that we're Iran's friends, sort of like going to Cuba. So just sit down and stop being a difficult partner in the Middle East and help us fight ISIS and cure cancer and everything else, and none of this worked out. Iran is an expansionist power that is a threat to our interests and a threat to the interests of every country in the region. That's what everybody thinks. The Obama administration, in part because it saw this agreement as a way to change that, but even when it didn't change that, it now feels that in its dying days, that any action it takes against Iran, for whatever reason, risks this precious legacy of the agreement that Iran might tear it up. Iran won't, but that seems to be the logic, and we encounter this all of the time, unfortunately.
On that note, we have to take a break. We'll be right back after a brief message.
The patients who come to us after illness or injury are often in pain and fearful of losing their independence. I make it my mission to treat them like family. I listen to their concerns. I help them heal and gain strength. My goal is for them to not need us. To know that I help them, there's no better feeling.
Morse Life Short-Term Rehabilitation.
Morse Life Health System, honoring senior living.
Welcome back, and we're busy talking to distinguished fellows from the Washington Institute. We've just spoken about the Iran deal vis-a-vis Trump. And now I'd like to talk about Israel-United States relations and what you think will happen in the new administration. We have a new choice of ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. Give us your thoughts.
Look, we don't know yet which players are going to do what. We don't know how active the Secretary of State is going to be, assuming it's Mr. Tillerson. Sometimes this issue is run out of the White House. So is that going to be more focused on the president himself, Mr. Flynn? Traditionally, the ambassador to Israel is not a quarterback of the policy. He's more a wide receiver, but his input is critical. But it's the policy is made in Washington. So I think it's, we have the president saying this is the ultimate deal. He wants to do a deal. We don't know how if he's going to go through on that. I think in the beginning there's going to be a honeymoon between him, Trump, and Netanyahu. They will probably bond over the Iran nuclear deal, complaining about it, and how they each would have negotiated a better deal. You could easily see that. You could see them saying how America has to be respected by Arab allies as well as Israel. You have this very unusual situation going on where Israel and the Arab states are working closer than ever before, below the radar, on common threats. If it comes from Iran, if it comes from ISIS, Hamas, jihadi groups, the Muslim Brotherhood, there's a lot of commonality in a way we've never seen it. So I know people like to despair over the Middle East, but there is some good news. So they could bond over that good news as well. The question is that bonding going to be permanent over, let's say, over the next 4 years? It's too soon. The Middle East throws a lot of curveballs at you, and it's very hard to say that you know exactly how things are going to unfold. And also, if Mr. Trump is serious about doing an ultimate deal, can Netanyahu's coalition make that deal possible? Can the Arab side, can the Palestinian side do it? They're in the throes of a succession issue right now. You have Abbas, he's going to be 82 in March, smokes 2 packs a day, doesn't have a clear successor. I mean, there's a lot of questions here. So while I think the vibe between Washington and Jerusalem is going to be very good, in the short term, how it plays out over 4 years, it's hard to say. And I think, but I would look at the policy being made in Washington, not being made necessarily by ambassadors overseas.
What about Trump's platform, we're moving the capital to Jerusalem.
Right. Well, that's a very important thing. He says moving the embassy.
The embassy.
You know, it's interesting. Viewers aren't aware of this little known fact, but Obama signed, these are 6-month waivers. There is a law from 1995 to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Every 6 months, an American president signs a waiver that says this is against, in the name of national security of the U.S. to delay this. The next time that sanction is up, that waiver is up for signature, that would have to be signed by Trump, is on June 1st. Now, what's June 1st, 2017? It's 5 days before the 50th anniversary of the 1967 war, where Israel won Jerusalem when it was attacked by Arabs. So the symbolism is going to be very irresistible. But look, here's the thing you have to weigh. On one hand, there's a historic injustice that can be said is that, look, even if the Palestinians get 100% of what they want in negotiations, that has nothing to do with the western part of Jerusalem. So Israelis feel there's an injustice here. The problem with the Middle East is it doesn't always unfold under rational lines. And the word Jerusalem is such a trigger word in the Arab world, the Muslim world, that I'm concerned that it will take on a life of its own. When Ehud Olmert was the mayor of Jerusalem in 1996 and Benjamin Netanyahu was the prime minister, who thought that opening a tunnel in the old city of Jerusalem would have such ramifications? Now, Yasser Arafat lied and said it's being dug under the foundations of the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif, but 17 Israeli soldiers were killed. 70 Palestinians were killed. So I don't know if Trump if he's going to go through with it. I think there's a chance he might. Does he do spade work here in advance? Does he consult with allies? Does he do it privately? Does he publicly say this has nothing to do with East Jerusalem and I want to go on Al Jazeera and all these Arab satellite channels and Al Arabiya? I don't know. But I just worry that the Jerusalem could be a third rail of Middle East politics. You touch it, you're electrocuted.
Right.
So this has got to be handled very delicately. I can understand why Israelis feel the way they do, but we don't want there to be riots. Now, there's been times people have said there would be riots and there weren't riots. So how the president would actually prepare his administration, they've got a lot going on in those first 6 months in office. Is this going to be something? We hear they want to move on this early, but we don't know. There's no way of knowing. All I'm saying is, you got to look at both sides of the ledger here. Rationally, I understand it, but the problem is Jerusalem is often irrational, and there's got to be a lot of groundwork, and maybe some would just say, don't do it. You don't want to put Americans and embassies in different parts of the region at risk. So how this is handled is going to be critical.
The media is also talking about the settlement issue and how Friedman, and this is all over the place, that he wants to go beyond the Green Line. Okay,
well, this is a key point. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds for you, but I will say it very simply. 80% of the settlers live in about 5% of the land, largely adjacent to the old 1967 boundary. And there's 20% that are on what we call the other side of the security barrier, which was done because of all these suicide bombers who were coming into the country. Bet El, which he was the head of the American Friends of that yeshiva, is on the other side of the line. So he's on the farther side. I think Netanyahu would like to see a reaffirmation of what the letter that George Bush gave to Ariel Sharon, which said that these settlement clusters, where the 80% live in what we call blocks, that they are within the barrier, that there would be a focus there. I think in a weird, counterintuitive way, I think it's in Netanyahu's interest to have an American anchor. Because ironically, he's always been able to rely on the United States of America to be the heavy. That they say, well, because of the Americans, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And that's his answer to this Mr. Bennett, the head of the settler movement and the Jewish Home Party. But if there's no American policy for the first time ever, then Bennett will say, we're home alone, the adults are gone, we could just move everything out beyond the fence. But then Netanyahu, I think it's a moment of truth, because then he'll be building this binational state. He'll be enmeshing Israel deeper into the Palestinian areas and making sure that Israel doesn't have a Jewish majority. So I think he's always liked it, that he could blame the United States. Right. So I think for him, if he could get a reaffirmation of the Bush letter, which speaks about the blocks, the area inside, where 80% of the settlers live, and it's all within around 5% or so of the area, that would give him an answer to the settlers. But if he doesn't have America to blame, to kick around, then he's on it on his own. And then I think Bennett will tell his voters, hey, you want to vote for the copy, Netanyahu, who doesn't want to build out here? Or you will vote for me, I'm the original. So I think Netanyahu needs an American policy no less than everybody else. So I think I would look to see if that letter is reaffirmed. It wasn't reaffirmed by President Obama, I should say, but that's a whole story in and of itself.
Thank you, David. We'll be right back with the remainder of our program after this brief message.
Coming up, we're going to be hearing some more comments from our roundtable discussion.
From empowering Jewish college students to stand up to anti-Israel activity on campus, to enabling seniors and Holocaust survivors to age with dignity, transforming, inspiring, saving, Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County is doing all of this here and around the world.
Welcome back. Jim, you just returned from a bipartisan trip, a political trip to the Middle East. Could you give us some highlights of that venture?
The whole idea was to bring people who would likely be in either a new Democratic or a new Republican administration, or else advising the people in it, and to expose them to the top levels of three of our key allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. We traveled through the region at the end of August for about 8 days. The interesting thing is, with different accents, we heard almost the same message. It's Iran, stupid. They are on the march in the region, and they need to be counted and contained. B, where are you, America? We've expected you to be there. We've counted on you for 4 decades now to be the security provider for the region. It's in your interest, given terrorism, given the continued importance of hydrocarbons, given your alliance system. Why aren't you here? 3, we're doing okay ourselves, that is Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, and we're making these alliances that David talked about. And but we're worried about our friends and the region as a whole, and we really need you back. That was the theme we got in all 3. It's a very powerful theme. I think that the Trump administration will have to respond to it. I know many of the people coming in, by their nature, they've spent a great deal of time in the Middle East, and they will be receptive to that call to return.
Wow, that was a very productive experience in terms of knowledge for our new administration. Tell me your feeling. First of all, Aleppo has fallen. What's next? Where does Syria go from there?
That's a great question, because it covers so much of the region. Your viewers are looking at one of the greatest humanitarian tragedies and disasters and war crimes since World War II. Also, a refugee flood that is endangering the very substance of our European allies and contributed to Britain's vote against the European Union. And at the same time, Syria gave rise to ISIS as we know it, this terrorist offshoot of Al-Qaeda, all coming out of that one conflict. But strikingly, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing, this is a power grab at this point by Iran, enabled by Russia and by Iran's friends, particularly Hezbollah, to dominate the core Levant center of the Middle East. Iraq is next. They already have Lebanon pretty well under their control. They're looking north at Turkey. They're looking south at the peninsula, Saudi Arabia, and at Israel. This is extremely worrisome. When I talk generally about people want us to come back into the region, they mainly mean do something to stop these guys in Syria, because if they are not stopped in Syria, somehow they're going to take over Iraq with almost as much oil reserves as Iran, and what happens next?
Rex Tillerson coming in as if he's approved as the next Secretary of State. How do you think he will be able to negotiate with Russia based on his experience?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Your viewers need to know that I've been an advisor to Exxon, so I may not be totally objective, but this is a very experienced international player who has had extraordinary contacts for several decades with all of the leaders throughout, almost all of the leaders throughout the world. I think that first of all, the issue will not be Rex Tillerson's Russia policy, it will be Donald Trump's Russia policy, and Rex Tillerson will execute that policy. There's no doubt in my mind, very competently and very loyally, but the question is, where is Trump?
That is the question. Where is Trump? Where will he formulate, and how will he formulate his policy?
We don't know. A lot of his instincts, as we've heard in his past experience, makes him indulgent of Mr. Putin. All I can say is, from everything I've experienced, the invasion of Georgia, what Russia's done in the Middle East, what it's done in Ukraine, what it's done to us here at home, if Donald Trump's mission one is to make America great again, and I believe it is, sooner or later he's going to find obstacle number one to that is Putin's depredations around the world, and that's when the crunch point comes.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, just that I agree very much with Jim, and I think you're going to have to somehow deal with the Russia issue. Is there a deal to be had with him? I don't know, but you might have to very much push back, and it'll be very interesting to see the different personalities in this administration, because they have different views on Russia, and where does the president come out based on this range of views? I mean, this is going to be, stay tuned. There's going to be something to watch.
It's very frightening, and and one of the biggest concerns, I think, is the unknown. Nobody knows where Trump is going with this, and I don't know where he will, or how he will come up with his policy.
It is an unknown. What I can say is, from knowing many of the people that have been appointed by him, and those are his decisions, he has the right people, if he's willing to listen, to tell him the right answers. He's picked these people. He's shown in other contexts an ability to listen, so stay tuned.
Okay, on that note, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening our community on what's going on in the Middle East.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Susan.
Coming up, final thoughts on Mosaic.
Thousands of community members come together through programs and services provided by Federation and our local partner agencies to create a vibrant and vital community in Palm Beach County. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
Barbara, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy gives people like me such comfort when it comes to really understanding what's going on around the world in the Middle East in specific.
It's so true, and it's so important now. Thank you so much for being with us. Be with us again next week when we have another look into the Jewish world. Goodbye from Mosaic.